Are you a newly licensed real estate agent? Or maybe you're just a curious buyer that would like to see the behind the scenes from the agent's perspective of how the buying process works? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the steps from first meeting your buyer all the way through until when your buyer gets the keys for their new house. Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Moynihan, and I'm a local real estate agent and investor based out of Keene, New Hampshire. So if you're someone that's looking to buy, sell, or invest around the New Hampshire area, feel free to reach out to me. Even if you just have a question about real estate, my contact info is here and down below, of course. Feel free to reach out, shoot me a text. I'd be more than happy to help. And if at any point you have a question about something with the buyer process, just drop it in the comments below. I'll be sure to respond to that directly. And if any value comes about during the video, I would appreciate a like and hitting that subscribe button, as I do release these weekly videos. And without further ado, let's dive right into the buyer process. So if you're a new real estate agent, there's a plethora of ways that you can get your first buyer, whether that be from paid leads, social media, a referral from friends and family, maybe an office referral from your broker, or a referral from someone that's an out-of-state buyer. But of course, once you actually get that lead, the first step is to have a meeting and actually call or talk with your new prospective buyer, which will in turn become your client. So of course, on your first initial call, you want to just kind of set the parameters of what they're looking for, kind of see what their criteria is, of course, bedrooms, bathrooms, if they want land, garage, all that good stuff while looking for a house. You'll also want to see how they're going to be purchasing the house. Are they going to be a cash buyer? Are they going to need pre-approval? Are they already pre-approved? Do they need to sell a house? All these questions should be asked pretty quickly to understand where you are and what page you're working from. And if they aren't pre-approved, you'd like to put them in contact with your lender. Hopefully you have a preferred lender, but as a new licensed real estate agent, you probably don't have a ton of connections yet, so ask your broker who a good lender is to send them to. And this will really get the ball rolling, kind of give you a little bit to work on getting a search set up and finding some houses that might work for them. And then they'll be working on getting a pre-approval again if they don't already have it. And the next step is going to be the buyer's presentation. And this is kind of something I still need to work a little bit better on, to be honest, because it's just hard to get people in to have a buyer's presentation, because a lot of these buyers are itchy to get out there and actually look at homes in person, that they don't want to come down to an office or a coffee shop or even on Zoom to sit down for 15 to 35 minutes to just kind of talk over the whole process and actually show them what's going to be happening throughout it, so that they know up front what steps are going to be needed at the times of the buying process. So this is your next step, is actually getting them to sit down. And when you're there, you'll want to go over some properties with them and kind of make sure that the two of you guys are on the same page and you're actually sending them houses that they're interested in, and not just something that matches their criteria, but maybe it's not even a location that they're looking at. And during this buyer's presentation is really where you set the parameters for the relationship of being a client with you. And it's where you want to actually kind of tell them the breakdown of the process and where you're going to need their help, and then the spots where they're going to need your help. So kind of telling them straight up, right up front, hey, at this point, we're going to need this from you, this and this. So you want to actually set these parameters right up front so that they can feel confident when the offer comes and they can put that in and not second guess themselves. So once you have the buyer's presentation, the buyer should also have their pre-approval all set up. So now you can actually start looking at houses in person and going to do some showings with your new buyers. And this is usually one of the longest parts of the process, is actually going out, showing houses and finding the ones you like. But hopefully during your buyer's presentation, you kind of nailed down their criteria so that you're not wasting your time showing them stuff that you in the back of your mind's like, this really isn't matching what you told me it's going to match. So that's why you set up that initial buyer's presentation, is to make sure everyone's on the same page. Be like, hey, if you send me something and I kind of already know the house, I'm just going to be straight up with you and tell you this might not be a good fit for you. But once you do find a house for them and they're like, all right, this is the one, let's put in an offer. Can we get the ball rolling on that? So now this is where we're on the next step, the offer. So if you're a new agent or just a buyer that is curious about this process and the behind the scenes, what does an offer actually entail? Well, an offer is just a purchase and sales contract that states the terms of the transaction between the seller and prospective buyer. So things that will be on the contract are, of course, the names of both parties, the price, the earnest money deposit, contingencies for like inspection, financing, and then any other like seller concessions or cash back, any of that type of stuff will be included in this contract. And then if anything changes, you usually get what is called an addendum, which you list out what is getting changed, and then you'll have to have both parties sign it to agree that that addendum has changed the original contract. And of course, once you actually write up the purchase and sales and send the offer in to the sellers, they have kind of three options. They can either accept it, reject it, or counter it. So of course, you want them to accept it and hopefully come to terms nice and simple. If they reject it, you can kind of always, I guess, go back with a second offer, but they could have also just rejected it because someone had a higher price. It's not necessarily your terms that they didn't like, they just had a better offer. Or if they counter it, maybe you kind of lowballed them, so they brought it back up to like a middle ground, and either you can agree on that or you send them another counter back. And sometimes it does go back and forth here and there, and then you finally become agreed upon, all parties sign, and then that's kind of once the clock starts ticking, is once you have a fully executed purchase and sales, then this is where stuff starts actually having a timeline. And also, when you do have a accepted purchase and sales and all parties are signed, you have a couple days to get the earnest money deposit to the selling agent's brokerage, where they will hold the deposit, or it can get held by a title company sometimes, depending on the state you're in, I believe. But in my state, in New Hampshire, most of the time, the listing agent's broker holds some earnest money deposit. And you might be asking yourself, what is an earnest money deposit? Essentially, this is just a deposit that you put down on the property once you get an accepted offer, kind of show that you're serious and you have some skin in the game. It's usually about 1% to 2% of the purchase price, but it can kind of vary again where what state you're in. I mean, sometimes you just see $1,000 as kind of just the normal, but it can also be the 1%. It depends where you are, what your broker kind of teaches you, and how it works. It's not that big of a deal, but the reason you do it is because, say that you have the earnest money deposit up and the buyer backs out for a reason that wasn't a contingency in the contract, that seller can either have the option to give back the earnest money deposit to the buyer, or if it was just a complete waste of the seller's time and the buyer just backed out because maybe they saw another property they liked or something weird happened where it wasn't a contingency, the seller has the option to keep that. But if you back out because of a contingency, so say you had a home inspection contingency and it came back bad, and you're like, I just want out of this deal, then they'll give you the full thing back because that was a contingency in the agreed upon contract. So, like I said, once you get this agreed upon contract and a full offer signed, this is once the clock actually starts ticking, because you'll probably have a home inspection contingency. So you'll have to actually get these inspections scheduled. And for me, I usually give my buyers an option to either have them research the home inspectors and everything else that needs to be inspected. So, like septic, and if they want other pests or anything like that, I either give them the option of scheduling it and finding the people that they want to use, because sometimes they want to compare prices or they have a recommendation for a friend. But if not, I'll just say, hey, this is kind of my go-to inspector. I can get this scheduled for this day and this is going to be the cost. And then I'll do the scheduling, which is actually kind of nice because then I can schedule around my time frame. And most of the time, for at least my state, these inspection periods can be anywhere from 5 to 15 days. So again, that is why the clock is ticking. So you want to get these done as soon as possible so you have time to actually review the inspection report. And once you get the report back, this is when you as the agent and the buyer kind of sit down and go over the inspection report and see if there's anything that needs to be addressed. So chances are with a home inspection, there's going to be something that came up, because these inspectors literally go through everything from roof to basement, all in between. So as an agent, you'll want to kind of make sure you are seeing what your buyer's priorities are. So maybe there's something major that needs to be fixed, or something small that is like, hey, yes, we could ask for this, but it also might kind of get people mad if we're asking for these tiny little things. So you kind of just have to play back and forth and see what makes sense. Of course, if they're like, hey, this furnace is in horrible condition and is barely running, then that's something to be like, hey, you go back to the sellers and be like, either we need money for this furnace or it needs to be replaced, whichever one you want to do. And that's where an addendum would come in, where you rewrite part of the original contract to include what is now going to be agreed upon. And of course, this is also going to be a time when you're going to be kind of communicating as the buyer with a title company and, of course, your lender. So, a lender, a lot of that stuff happens behind the scenes, and you'll also have to find insurance for your house, which the lender sometimes can help with, or you at least have to get it and kind of have them be in communication with your lender and the title company, because all that has to be included in the closing. But once you, as the agent, are done the inspection period and all the renegotiations, then it's kind of just waiting for the clear to close. So the title company does their job, makes sure that they do a good title search and everything looks good. In New Hampshire, they're also the people who do the closing. So they'll also be scheduling the closing once we do get the clear to close. But like I said, once the inspection's over, the lender is kind of all you're waiting for to make sure that you get the clear to close from them. And then you're pretty much good. Then it's just actually waiting for the closing day. And then closing day is, of course, one of the best days for everyone, because your buyer's getting a brand new house and the seller's selling their house and get to move on with their life. And you feel accomplished because you helped your client through buying a house. But of course, the day before, you probably want to remind your buyers, because they're so excited about getting their new house, to make sure that they actually wire or bring a cashier's check for closing so that they can actually get the deal done and have the money there, and to have them bring their IDs so that they can actually because they usually scan their IDs to make sure they're the actual people buying the house. So make sure they don't forget those, or they'll have to figure out a way to drive back and grab their IDs. So remind them of those two things, because they're probably a little bit scatterbrained with everything happening. And then you sit down at the closing table, your buyers sign a ton of forms, especially if they're using a lender instead of going cash. With lenders, you sign a bunch of different paperwork. So once that's done, your buyers get the keys. And as an agent, you have your first closed transaction. So that's basically the whole process. Of course, I summed this up in a pretty quick video, but the buying process does actually entail a little bit more than the selling process, which I might make another video on. But as a buyer's agent, you really just want to help your client through this whole process, because a lot of times it's either a new thing that they've never done before, or it's something that they haven't done in a while, because most people aren't buying a house every year or two. It's more maybe every 5 to 10 years. So things change. Stuff happens differently in those times. Like, a lot of this stuff, like online now, wasn't a thing back in the day. So like, if it's an older client that you're working with, they might not like that as much, where they want to be more hands-on and communicate just on the phone and all that stuff. So you kind of have to work with your client and what they're accustomed to. But I hope this video has given you a decent outline of the buying process and how the agent actually works in the process. Of course, you want to help your client as much as possible and make the transaction as smooth as possible. So I really think one of the biggest things is getting off on the right foot with a buyer's presentation. And actually, just from day one, everyone's on the same page. They all know what needs to be done when during the transaction, because you're running through it before you ever even go see a house. Because once you actually start seeing a house, that's when the buyers kind of get a little scatterbrained. And sometimes they're just like, well, I want a house. I don't care about how it works, but it helps to sit down and set a baseline. So with that being said, I hope this video has brought you some value. Again, if it has, I would love it if you hit that like and subscribe button, as I do release these weekly real estate related videos. And again, if you do have any questions, drop them below in the comments. I'll be sure to respond to them directly. And if you're in New Hampshire looking to buy, sell, or invest, again, contact info here or down below. Or even if you just have questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to help. But with that being said, until next time.